If you drove your car anywhere in the UK today, there is a very real chance you are already breaking one of the new parking rules that most drivers have absolutely no idea about. The DVLA and local councils have quietly rolled out a series of updates that are now either fully in effect or coming into force imminently, and the fines attached to these changes are not small. We are talking about penalties starting at £80, doubling if you ignore them, and in some cases leading to your vehicle being clamped or towed before you even get back to it. So before you pull into that spot, before you leave your car outside a shop for 5 minutes, or before you park on your own street tonight, stay with me, because what you are about to hear could save you hundreds of pounds. Let us start with the first rule, and this one is already catching people off guard across every major city in England, Scotland, and Wales. Double yellow lines have always meant no parking, but the updated enforcement guidance now makes it explicitly clear that stopping even briefly to let someone out of the car counts as a parking contravention in designated areas. In the past, many drivers believed that as long as they stayed in the vehicle, they were fine. That grey area is gone. If your wheels are stationary and you are positioned on double yellow lines in a controlled zone, a civil enforcement officer can now issue a penalty charge notice, even if you drove away 30 seconds later. Dashcam footage and CCTV is increasingly being used to back these notices up. The second rule relates to white bay markings and their operating hours. A huge number of drivers park in white bays without reading the small sign on the nearby post, assuming that because there are no yellow lines, they are free to park there at any time. White bays almost always have time restrictions printed on a plate nearby, and those hours have been updated in many areas following a national review of parking signage. Some bays that previously allowed all-day parking have been reduced to a 2-hour window. Others that were free in the evenings are now restricted until 8 or 9 at night. If you have not checked the bay sign recently on a road you use regularly, do not assume the rules are the same as they were last year. The third update covers pavement parking, and this is a big one. A blanket ban on pavement parking has been in discussion for years, and while a full national law is still making its way through the process, London has had strict enforcement for decades, and several other local authorities have now adopted their own versions. More importantly, the highway code changes that came into effect in 2022 cemented the expectation that drivers should not park on the pavement, and enforcement officers in many areas are now issuing fines under existing obstruction rules far more aggressively than before. If your car is even partially mounted on the curb, and it is causing or is likely to cause an obstruction to pedestrians, particularly wheelchair users and people with pushchairs, you can expect a fine. The excuse that everyone does it is not going to help you. The fourth rule is about electric vehicle charging bays, and this is where things get particularly sharp for non-EV drivers. As more charging bays are installed across supermarket car parks, high streets, and residential streets, the rules around misuse have been tightened significantly. Parking in a designated EV charging bay without an electric vehicle is now a ticketable offence in most managed car parks and on-street locations where the bay is clearly marked. Even if you own an EV but your car is not actively charging, some bays have a time limit, and overstaying that limit will result in a fine. This applies whether the charger is publicly funded or managed by a private company. The signs are getting clearer, and enforcement is increasing. The fifth update affects people who park near schools, and it is being enforced at times that are catching parents and local residents off guard. School keep clear markings, the zigzag lines outside school gates, have always been a no-stopping zone during school hours. But the definition of school hours in the updated guidance has been clarified to include not just the official start and finish time, but also the period immediately around breakfast clubs and after-school activities. In practical terms, this means the keep clear restriction can apply from as early as 7:30 in the morning and as late as 6 in the evening, depending on the school and the local authority. Councils have been given stronger powers to use CCTV cameras mounted on or near schools to issue penalty notices automatically, and there is no discretion involved. The camera sees the offence, The ticket is issued. The sixth rule is something that many motorists genuinely do not realise counts as a parking offence. Parking within 10 metres of a junction is illegal under the Highway Code and has been for a long time, but updated enforcement priorities mean officers are now specifically tasked with targeting this behaviour in urban areas. The reason is road safety, as vehicles parked too close to a junction obstruct sight lines for both drivers and pedestrians. If you regularly park on a side street and your car ends up near the corner, measure it out. 10 metres is further than most people think, and the fine is the same as any other parking penalty. The seventh update involves residents' parking permits and is affecting people who have recently moved or whose permit is up for renewal. Many councils have changed their permit zones and boundaries as part of wider traffic management reviews. If your permit was issued under an old zone code and the boundaries have shifted, your permit may no longer be valid on your own street, even if you have renewed it. It sounds absurd, but it has happened to residents in multiple councils. Always check the current zone map for your area when renewing, and if your council has recently changed its parking zone layouts, verify that your new permit covers the correct streets before assuming you are protected. The eighth rule is about loading and unloading restrictions. Single yellow lines mean restricted parking, not a complete ban, and they typically allow loading and unloading outside of the restricted hours. However, curb marks, which are short yellow marks painted at right angles to the curb, indicate a loading ban. Single curb marks mean a loading ban during certain hours, and double curb marks mean no loading or unloading at any time. A large number of drivers, including delivery drivers, are being fined because they do not recognise these curb marks or do not know what they mean. If you see those short yellow dashes on the curb, do not stop there. Find a separate sign nearby that confirms the hours, or assume it is a full-time ban if there are two marks. The ninth change relates to privately managed car parks and the use of automatic number plate recognition cameras. This is not a new technology, but the legal framework around it has matured significantly. Private car park operators are now required to follow a strict code of practice under the law introduced through the Parking Code of Practice Act, and while enforcement is still being phased in, drivers should be aware that appeals processes have been reformed. If you receive a ticket from a private car park, you now have clearer rights to appeal, but you also have fewer loopholes to exploit. Ignoring a private parking notice no longer guarantees it will go away. Operators are increasingly pursuing unpaid tickets through the courts and winning, with debt collection enforcement following. The 10th and final update is one that affects almost every driver at some point, and that is the rules around parking on your own driveway or on private land. If your driveway crosses a dropped curb and you park in a way that blocks the dropped curb from the pavement side, a neighbour or passerby can report you and the council can issue a fine. More significantly, if someone else parks across your dropped curb, blocking you in or out of your own property, the council now has clearer enforcement obligations to act on a complaint. Dropped curb obstruction is taken seriously, and the fines apply equally to homeowners and visitors. If you are having work done at your home and your builder or tradesperson parks across the dropped curb, that fine can come back to you as the owner of the property. Now, here is what you actually need to do with all of this information. First, take 5 minutes to look up your local council's parking restrictions page online. Rules vary significantly between councils, and what applies in one borough may not apply in the next. Second, check any permit you hold to confirm it matches the current zone boundaries. Third, if you use a car park regularly, whether for work or shopping, check for any updated signage on the machines or posts, because operating hours and tariff structures change more often than people realise. Fourth, if you receive a penalty charge notice, do not ignore it, and do not automatically pay it either. Read it carefully, check whether it was issued correctly, check the time, the location, the vehicle details, and whether the signage in that area was clear and compliant. A significant percentage of tickets are successfully appealed simply because the signage was inadequate or the notice contained an error. The overall direction of parking enforcement in the UK is moving towards more cameras, more automation, and less reliance on physical wardens checking every car manually. That means fewer warnings, fewer moments where a warden decides to give you the benefit of the doubt, and more penalty notices arriving through the post with photographic evidence attached. The system is designed to be harder to argue with because the evidence is captured digitally the moment the offence occurs. What this means for you as a driver is that the responsibility for knowing the rules has never been higher. The signs are there, the laws are there, and the cameras are watching. Councils are under significant financial pressure, and parking enforcement generates revenue that funds local services, so the incentive to ticket is real. Being a careful and informed driver is genuinely the only reliable protection you have. The rules covered today are not obscure technicalities buried in legal documents. They are active enforcement priorities that officers and cameras are targeting right now, on the roads you drive every day, in the car parks you use every week. The £10 you save by not paying for a car park ticket could cost you £80 if you misjudge a restriction. The 30 seconds you save by stopping on double yellows could cost you the same. Stay informed. Check your surroundings before you park, and never assume that because you have parked somewhere before without issue, that the rules have not changed since then. Councils update their restrictions regularly, and they are not required to personally notify every driver in the area. The signs are considered sufficient notice, which is why it is your job to read them. If this video has helped you understand the rules better, or if you learned something you did not know before, please subscribe to my channel. New videos go out regularly, covering driving laws, DVLA updates, and everything you need to stay on the right side of the rules on UK roads. Hit the subscribe button now so you never miss an update that could save you from an unnecessary fine.